I'm Colonel James Walker. I've spent 30 years in uniform, most of it studying the anatomy of conflict. When you spend 3 decades in the company of men, you learn that the loudest noise isn't the explosion, it's the silence that follows. On Sunday, February 22, 2026, that silence was broken across Mexico. For years, the name Nemesio Rubén Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, was a ghost story whispered in the halls of intelligence. He was the last of the old guard, the successor to the myth of El Chapo. But El Mencho was different. He wasn't just a narco. He was a CEO of a paramilitary shadow state. I've seen the footage from the Tapalpa raid. Mexican special forces, working with a quiet assist from our own intelligence assets, finally closed the net. It was a high-intensity kinetic engagement. 4 cartel members down, 3 soldiers wounded. And at the center of it all, the most wanted man in the world, bleeding out on a transport bird. He died before he reached the capital. The mission was a success. On paper, it's a win for the Sheinbaum administration and a win for the White House. But in my experience, a successful mission is only the first 5 minutes of a much longer, darker movie. What happened next should be studied in every military academy in the West. Within hours of the news breaking, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, didn't just retreat, they counterattacked. Not a single target, but an entire nation. I'm looking at the reports. 250 roadblocks, 20 states paralyzed. In Puerto Vallarta, a town I visited in my civilian years, the streets turned into a kill zone. You had tourists like Jimbeck, people just looking for a sunset, watching helicopters circle and government trucks patrolling like they were in Fallujah. You had gang members shooting from moving vehicles, torching buses to create burning barriers. This wasn't a riot. This was a coordinated logistical operation. When a cartel can bring a country of 130 million people to its knees in 6 hours, you're no longer dealing with a gang. You're dealing with a professional insurgent force. As a colonel, I look at the casualties. 7 National Guard members killed in Jalisco, 6 more in Zapopan, a jail guard, a state prosecutor. The body count isn't just a number, it's a message. The CJNG was telling the world, you took our leader, so we will take your peace. Why was this reaction so much more effective than what we saw when El Chapo was taken? The answer is the franchise model. The CJNG isn't built like a pyramid, it's built like a multinational corporation. I've studied their structure. They allow local cells in places like Guanajuato or Veracruz to operate autonomously. They buy the brand. They pay tribute for the right to use the CJNG name and tactical support, but they run their own day-to-day. El Mencho allowed his regional commanders, men like El Trace or El Jardinero, to pursue their own profits as long as they followed the strategic direction from the top. When you kill the CEO of a company like that, the regional managers don't just quit, they fight for the promotion. Or worse, they break away and start their own subsidiaries. This sophistication is what the DEA has been warning us about. It's what makes them the greatest criminal threat we've ever faced. They aren't just selling drugs. They are selling a system of violence that is cheaper to produce and harder to dismantle than anything we saw in the 90s. Let's talk about the timing. We are 4 months away from the 2026 World Cup. Guadalajara is supposed to host 4 matches. You have over 1 million visitors expected. Millions of dollars in infrastructure investment. President Sheinbaum is under immense pressure from the Trump administration. Since 2025, when the cartels were designated as foreign terrorist organizations, the threat of U.S. military intervention has been hanging over Mexico like a guillotine. By taking out El Mencho now, Sheinbaum is trying to prove Mexico can handle its own house. She's trying to keep American boots off her soil. But the cartel knows this. Every burning bus in Guadalajara is a signal to the FIFA sponsors and the fans. Stay away. We are the ones in charge here. If the violence continues, we're looking at a $1.2 billion economic disaster. That's not just a drug war problem, that's a national survival problem. So what's next? I've sat in enough briefings to know that what's next is usually more of the same, but messier. History tells us that when a cartel head falls, one of 2 things happens. Either the organization fragments, leading to a war of all against all, as splinter groups fight for territory, or a new predator emerges. You have El Mencho's daughter, La Negra. You have his stepson, El Tres. You have regional commanders who have been waiting for their moment. And while they fight amongst themselves, their rivals, the Sinaloa cartel, are watching like vultures. They will move in. They will try to reclaim the roots they lost a decade ago. And then there's the cold, hard math of the trade. Fentanyl doesn't care who is in charge. It's cheap. It's profitable. The precursors are still coming into the ports. Removing one man, even a man as powerful as El Mencho, is like trying to stop a river by removing one stone. The water just flows around it. I've spent my life believing in the power of the mission. But as I get older, I realize that the military is a hammer, and not every problem is a nail. We can kill the leaders. We can seize the armored trucks and the rocket launchers. But until we address the infrastructure, the money laundering, and the insatiable demand on our side of the border, the cycle will repeat. The war isn't over. It's just changing shape. And for the people of Mexico and the tourists caught in the crossfire, the day after El Mencho is looking like a long, dark night. Stay disciplined. Watch the horizon. I'll talk to you again soon.